I promised that I would do the 5-act structure within a TV show. I'm going to show you that today. And we're going to do it like this. And we're going to break it into Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, Act 5. It's not super even, but you'll get the gist of where I'm going with this. And the show we're going to use is Monarch, Legacy of Monsters, which is an Apple show, it's a Godzilla show. So I'm going to focus on the pilot episode to show you how they have used the 5-act structure. And the acts that we have is we have the intro or the exposition. We've got the rising action, which is also the conflict or the rising conflict. Then we have our climax in the middle. Then we have the falling action, which you can also consider as like, things getting worse, kind of the descent into madness, I guess. And then we have our point of like catastrophe, if we were going to go back to that typical old school 5-act structure, Freytag's pyramid, that's the word I'm looking for. And then we have our resolution, and this is where things not only get tied up, but we also get kind of like a cliffhanger. It's setting us up for that, right? So in TV, every single episode needs to have some form of resolution / cliffhanger. Okay, so also just at the beginning of this, sometimes what you might have separately, I've seen it called a tag, but think of it like in Save the Cat. It is that opening image. It's the thing that's going to pull you into the episode. Think about Stranger Things, that initial chase through the elevator before we meet all the kids in the introduction. But we're looking at Monarch, and here it is. Here's how it works. So their opening tag is archive footage of King Kong, and it is Bill Rander's final vlog. And then we never see Bill Rander die, so we don't know. But we see him making this last vlog, and then we see this clash of monsters, and it sets us up with a little bit of what is the feeling of this show that we're going to watch. Now, the introduction is where things kind of go back down. We just settle into the normality, just regular everyday life, right? Before we get into the things are changing. And in this case, we have Kate, who is on a plane. She is heading to Japan to deal with her father's affairs. And on the plane, we even get a line from a passenger like, as if spraying for parasites is going to stop another monster attack. So we see flashbacks as well of an attack that Kate was in. And we're basically just aware that monsters is big business now. In the taxi driver says, "Are you in the trade? Monster prep," right? So we're just aware of monsters are now around, right? And we're in Japan. Now this real key bit, the inciting incident, what this is in this story is Kate gets to her father's house in Japan to realize, shock, he has another family. So family number 2. And this is what's going to start our rising action, our conflict. Our conflict really exists between Kate and her brother, half-brother, Kentaro. So that sets up this relationship that's going to drive that part of the story forward. It's also in this place where we start to meet some of the other characters, and some of those other characters include Bill Rander when he was younger, and it includes Kate's grandma, which we don't learn is her grandma, but do we? I can't remember if we quite learn it's her grandma at this point. But we learn about Bill, Lee, and this is set in the 1950s, this part of the story. And lastly, Keiko. Now, what we're watching in their story is them trying to find the monsters to begin with. So we've got 2 different timelines going on at the same time, but in both of them, we are rising action and we're pushing forwards towards this conflict, towards this climax. So here, the kind of conflict is between Lee and Bill and Keiko, where he is trying to ascertain if they're doing the right thing because they're going into a dangerous situation. They're looking for monsters in Kazakhstan. And meanwhile, Kate and her half-brother are arguing about what was her dad really like, was he a bit of an arsehole? So the climax comes in the middle, smack bang in the middle actually, of this episode, And this is where TV is a little different to film, although film you still have that midpoint in the middle, really important. But the climax here, we get the Godzilla alarm. And this is where Kate and her half-brother and his mum have to rush into the underground and they have to hide from Godzilla. Now, Godzilla's not actually there, but we don't know that at this point. And within this, we get the flashback where we actually see Godzilla for the first time, full face, full everything. That is the bit we've been waiting for, to see the monsters that we know exist, because we've had a glimpse in the introduction. This climax builds us to this central point where we think, things are about to really kick off. But what happens is, because Godzilla is not there, it turns into this falling action. And we kind of now get to breathe a little bit, where we've unpacked a bit of information about Kate's background with Godzilla. And what we're seeing now is this debate continue between Kate and her half-brother about their dad, because what they find within this kind of, probably like this region here, is they find Dad's Monarch folder. So this is where we begin to understand about Monarch, the bigger industry, facility, whatever you want to call it, organization. And also within that, Tim, who is going to become a central character, Tim who works at Monarch. Now this falling action does kind of, again, another reason I don't like this layout is it's actually kind of coming down, but it's also going up in terms of energy, because what we also have is this argument between those in the 1950s, Lee, Keika, Bill, about the monsters. Should they go down and explore them? So we have two types of debate here before we get to the catastrophe and the resolution and the kind of cliffhanger. And this section, there's two key things that are going to happen. The first one is, at this point, we think Kate's given up. Kate's like, I'm not interested, I don't care about who Dad is. But then in the files, because they also meet May here, so another central character coming in this second half, really, a bit more in detail. We get Kate, she sees her grandma, and we see that here. We see this in the section, which even though she's about to stop caring, suddenly she's like, why is my grandma in these files? And we know, we kind of grasp, if we haven't already, that 1950s and the 2015 timeline are joined through this family. But the key bit, the cliffhanger, is, spoiler alert, so, don't listen if you haven't seen it, or it's not, well, it is kind of a cliffhanger. Well, what we get is Keika falls with the monsters. So they decide that they're going to go and find these monsters in the 1950s. They get into this situation, they see all these monsters, they climb down to study them, but they all wake up, and that leads to this tragic moment. That is the end of the episode. And that is how Monarch follows the 5-act structure. Stranger Things, very quickly, kind of a similar thing. So we've got the introduction with the chase through the facility, then we meet all the young characters, they learn about Will's disappearance, we follow them as they deal with the fact that police aren't taking it seriously, Will's mum starting to experience these weird things, these phone calls. Climax in the middle, we get 11 coming into the story, and then around here, the kids meet 11. That's a very loose, quick description of it. But have a look, try this with different TV pilot episodes, because the longer a show goes on, a bit more flexibility comes into it. They might change their structure, but a pilot episode generally will go down this line. So I hope you enjoyed that. And if you've not watched it, give the pilot of Monarch a watch. I think it's a good pilot episode to kind of have a look at. See you soon.